Excuse me, I just have to start this again. We'll turn in our Bibles to 1 Corinthians to start off with, but we will be bouncing around. 1 Corinthians 3, Romans, Corinthians. Last week we saw how saved people saved by God's grace, could be indistinguishable from the unsaved by their actions. They act just like the unsaved in very many cases. And the cause of this is that they were immature in the faith. They had not progressed very far down the narrow, hard path. Yes, they're still saved, but they are still so close to what they were when they were first saved, so close to their worldly past. They still remember and accept all those things of the unsaved life. And because they haven't moved far from that life, because they are still consuming only spiritual milk and are content with not diving deeper into God's Word or spending any more time in His Word than they absolutely have to, it becomes easy for them to bring their sinful nature along with them and not think anything is wrong with that. They look at their feelings as just as relevant as God's Word. People like these are comfortable with the world. They're comfortable being in the world and think nothing wrong of it. When we talk about getting our feet and hands dirty in the world outside, they think it's a physical dirt. It's not that program that we watch on TV, or it's because it's natural for them. That's why Paul calls them in 1 Corinthians the natural man. And in their mind in churches, they believe that it's the end which is a church full of people, justifies the means of softening the gospel. It's easy. I've heard a pastor say that once. Being a Christian's easy. Like, what world are you on? And these carnal Christians are lazy, short-sighted. Their focus is on satisfying themselves and their flesh at the expense of the spiritual walk. Christians should not be lazy. We are to be hard workers, not only in studying God's Word, but we should be hard workers when we're out in the world. If you're one of these people at your job, you're always known for being that person that, you always disappear when there's work to be done. That's not what a Christian's witness is supposed to be like. The Bible says in 2 Timothy 2:15, work hard so that you can present yourself to God and receive His approval. Be a good worker, one who does not need to be ashamed and who correctly explains the word of truth. For those of you that were in our Awana program, that's the Awana theme verse. I know Tracy could probably say it, but it'll be in King James language, and we don't know if we want to know. Many verses I memorized King James. But Christians should not take the easy way. They should not parrot what other people have said or copy what other people have researched. They should be seekers and hard workers in the way they study. Work is the last thing that unbelievers can connect to when they talk about Christ. This is very much a problem in today's churches and for many of today's Christians. They're carnal Christians. People who don't want to put the time in to grow in the Lord. They'll try and do things easy. I think I shared with you last week, my father-in-law had gone to a church, and in the bulletin, the pastor was not trying to hide it. This sermon was written by so-and-so. And it wasn't the pastor. It wasn't even someone in that church. He just bought a book of sermons and was reading them. He didn't want to bother to put the time in because the Bible was just a bunch of words to them. Clearly, the man had no Holy Spirit in him, or he was not doing what he was supposed to be doing. Frankly, the carnal Christian wants to put as little time into satisfying spiritual needs. They like material things. The latest TV show or sports or hobby. Their focus, very frankly, is on themselves and what their church can do for them, not what they can do for their church. We have to remember what Paul would warn about the churches in the last days. In 2 Timothy 4:3, he said, "For the time is coming when people will no longer listen to sound and wholesome teaching. They will follow their own desires and will look for teachers who will tell them whatever their itching ears want to hear." And I think in one of my first sermons here, I don't itch people's ears. Welcome to the future church today. People who discount pastors or leaders who share from God's Word, who don't want to hear what God's Word says because it doesn't line up with the wisdom of the world, because again, they're so close to being unsaved that they don't really understand. They seek to serve God, but only as His trusted advisor. They serve others by telling them what they should do. Oh, you should why is that stuff there? Why don't we get rid of it? Oh, why don't you clean it up? Oh, no, you do it. Again, it's not about telling others what to do. That's not how Christian leaders lead, and that's what we're going to look at today. Today we're going to look at two ways God's leaders are portrayed. They're either field workers, planters and waterers, and next week we're going to learn about their builders, and that they will be giving a testimony before God of what they did. We have to remember that in this letter to the Corinthian church, Paul exposed the Corinthian church for being carnal, for being worldly. They were focused on the different outward aspects of different workers that God had sent to them. Paul, who was a Pharisee's Pharisee, who had full knowledge and power, didn't come to him that way and talk about his credentials. No, he came humbly. In 1 Corinthians 2, verses 1 and 2, he said, "When I came to you, dear brothers and sisters, I didn't use lofty words and impressive knowledge to tell you God's secret plan, for I decided that while I was with you, I would forget everything except Jesus Christ, the one who was crucified." Paul kept his message simple. He talked about Jesus when he planted the church. He didn't talk about anything else. It was just Jesus Christ and Him crucified. He talked about the gospel. And that's what you need. In order to be saved, to be born again, you have to accept the gospel. And not just in your head, but 18 inches lower into your heart. He didn't want them to be looking back and saying, well, Paul was a good talker. He argued us into saying the prayer. No, that's not it. Later on, God sent Apollos. And Apollos was a very different person. He was, number one, from Alexandria in Egypt. And in Acts 18, verses 24 and 26, this is what we read about Apollos. He says, "Meanwhile, a Jew named Apollos, who was an eloquent speaker, who knew the Scripture well, had arrived in Ephesus from Alexandria in Egypt. He had been taught the way of the Lord, and he taught others about Jesus with an enthusiastic spirit and with accuracy. However, he knew only about John's baptism. And when Priscilla and Aquila heard him preaching boldly in the synagogue, they took him aside and explained the way of God more accurately." Now, so Apollos didn't come in with just humbly. He came in arguing with people in the synagogues. He argued with people and looked from Scripture. He didn't just say, "Look, I'm going to tell you this." He's going to say, "Let's look at Scriptures." And he was a humble enough man that when Aquila and Priscilla heard him speak and realized that his knowledge wasn't complete, was willing to accept being taught by this husband and wife team. Humility is important for Christians. But both of these men understood their place and their job. It was the immature Corinthians who didn't understand, who attempted to differentiate and say, well, I follow Paul, or I follow Apollos. And Paul in his letter is arguing over that, said, if you argue over which godly believer you follow, it's a type of argument that the world would have. That there was no difference. And the reason why it's not an argument for believers to have, in 1 Corinthians 3, verse 5, he says, after all, who is Apollos? Who is Paul? We are only God's servants through whom you believed the good news. Each of us did the work the Lord gave us. He asks a very rhetorical question. Who's Apollos? Who's Paul? And then he answers it. He says, we're just servants of God. Now, I want to point out, this is not the word that's normally translated servant in the New Testament. The word normally translated servant in the New Testament is doulos. And it literally means slave. Now, modern translations have said, oh, it's a servant, to make it easier to accept. But the word meant slave. And some people say, well, it means bond slave too, a voluntary slave. It's still a slave. Once you're a bond slave, you're a slave. You may have done it voluntarily, but I'm sorry, you're still there. So, the Bible is clear. You're either a slave to sin or you're a slave to God. And if that's unacceptable to you, you're a slave to the world or sin. But, as I said, Paul didn't use doulos here. He said that he and Apollos were servants. That word translated servants is the Greek word diakonos. Does anyone know what diakonos is also translated as? Deacon. Yeah. It literally means a waiter, or the one I like, one who runs errands. We sometimes think, oh, deacon, or it can mean minister, or even a waiter. We sometimes, Christianize it. Oh, I'm a waiter for God. But again, the better translation is, are you an errand boy for God? Are you a gopher? Go for this, go for that. That's what it really means. Because when it says waiter, it means the lowest class of waiter. It means a gopher or an errand boy. One of the things that caused my dad to retire from his job is when he was hired as, and this was an actual title, a menial laborer. And my dad had like a 6th grade education. That was it, 6th or 9th grade. I get those dyslexic things going on. So he's either 6th grade or 9th grade, but he didn't know what menial laborer was. All he knew is he had a job. And he told his boss, what is a menial laborer? And the guy said, you do whatever we tell you. That's it. You're the bottom of the barrel. That's what you do. So flash forward 36 years, and my dad is looking at someone, and the guy's leaning up against the wall, and he's a menial laborer. That was his title. And my dad said, you got to sweep the floor. And the guy goes, no, I don't. I'm a menial laborer. My dad tried to educate him. He refused, and my dad said, okay, at this point, I'm retiring. So, Paul is saying this to the Corinthian church and to us. The reason you should not argue about people God sends is it's insane to build a ministry based on an errand boy. Why would you argue about the errand boy being Paul or the errand boy being Apollos? They're just errand boys, gophers. Instead, give praise to the one who sent those errand boys or errand girls to you. Understand, if you wanted to honor Picasso, you wouldn't hold up his paintbrush and go, oh, look at it, it's a paintbrush. Woo, that looks great, isn't it? Let's make a monument to this paintbrush. No. You can honor Picasso. Well, I don't think I can honor Picasso. That's the guy with the weird eyes and things like that. Yeah, it's because the paintbrush was the thing that was used by the artist to create, what they call art. Now, that doesn't mean that you should abuse or take advantage of the people God sends. The Bible says in 1 Thessalonians 5:12 and 13, dear brothers and sisters, honor those who are your leaders in the Lord's work. They work hard among you and give you spiritual guidance. Show them great respect and wholehearted love because of their work, and live peaceably with each other. Leaders and teachers may be errand boys, but they're God's errand boys. Remember in the upper room. Because sometimes Christians don't want to be servants. Or they want to be servants for a time. But on that last day that Jesus was on earth, he got down and washed the disciples' feet. Even Judas Iscariot's feet. The man that was going to betray him, that was going to kill him, that had been walking to him with him for 3 years. Jesus washed his feet. And remember, Jesus concluded why he did that. Flip over to John 13. Just a couple books to the left. John 13. And look at verses 12 to 15. John 13. And we'll do 12, I think, probably 17, I guess. He says, after washing their feet, he put on his robe again and sat down and asked, do you understand what I was doing? Yeah, you can almost see Jesus sitting down, can't you? And he's looking around. Do you know why I did that? He says, you call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, because I am. That's what I am. And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. I have given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you. I tell you the truth. Slaves are not greater than their master, nor is the messenger more important than the one who sends the message. What a clear image of Christian leadership. Whoever's leading, whoever's speaking, is not as important as what's being spoken and who gave that. It's about God. He says, and he wasn't saying that, and I've seen churches or read about churches that the leaders during communion will wash people's feet. They missed the point. The point is, the washing of feet was the job of the lowest slave in the household. No slave was lower than that person, than who had to wash another's feet, as the guest's feet as they came in. That's the example he's setting. If you're going to be a leader, you have to serve. If you want to be a teacher, you have to serve. You have to work. And it doesn't matter how humiliating it may be for you. I love how he concludes in verse 17. Now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them. Christians are not supposed to only know the words. We're supposed to do them, put them into practice, even to people who may not be worthy. But Paul says, regardless who came to the Corinthians, whether it was Paul or Apollos, regardless of their traits or their abilities or what they said, God used his errand boys to bring the Corinthians the good news, which is what the Corinthians ultimately believed in. God doesn't need great speakers, doesn't need great orators. He doesn't want good students who don't apply what they know. You show me someone who says they burned out from too much godly learning, and I'll show you someone who doesn't apply what they've learned. Every one of us can learn from God's Word, but it means nothing if we don't go out in the world and do it. They focus on trying to learn the intellectual secret to salvation. And let me let you know what the secret is. There is no intellectual way to be saved. You can't do it. God doesn't want all the right words to be said without putting them into practice. Remember, that's what Jesus testified before the Jewish leaders in Matthew 15, verses 8 and 9. He says, these people honor me. He's quoting from the Old Testament. Honor me with their lips. This is God talking. But their hearts are far from me. Their worship is a farce. For they teach man-made ideas as commands from God. Jesus is talking to the people this way. God wants errand boys and girls, gophers, to do his will without question. And if being an errand boy or an errand girl for God and his people is beneath you, you cannot be useful for the kingdom of God. Many people want to serve God, but only as a trusted advisor. You're just putting on airs. You're like the apostles who, even when Jesus was in his last day in the upper room, were still arguing about who was the greatest. And he's giving these illustrations to them about, and they didn't hear it, they were still arguing about who was greatest. And as I said, we're going to look at two illustrations, planters and waterers. And next week we're going to look at builders. So he says we're like field workers. So if you go back to 1 Corinthians 3, look at verse 6. We're going to look at 6 to 9. And we'll probably hold on. So if I take you to another section, put your finger in 1 Corinthians 3. Paul writes, I planted the seed in your hearts, and Apollos watered it. But it was God who made it grow. It's not important who does the planting or who does the watering. What's important is that God makes the seed grow. The one who plants and the one who waters work together with the same purpose. And both will be rewarded for their working hard. For we are God's workers, and you are God's field, you are God's building. Paul says he planted the seed in their hearts. Apollos came later on and watered it. But work of neither of them means anything without the God making the seed grow. In other words, if Paul and Apollos would do planting seeds without God's acting and God's working, Paul and Apollos were just digging up dirt and making mud. It would mean nothing. Farmers know that they can do everything correct. Plant the seed at the proper time, water it, but they are incapable of causing that seed to grow. All their work means nothing unless there's a power, and we know it's God, many farmers may not, that cause it to grow. Here's another interesting tidbit about the underlying language. The tense that Paul used to describe his and Apollos' work is a matter of fact. He's just saying, I planted and Apollos watered. There's nothing special about it. It's literally, I planted the seed, Apollos watered it. But when Paul goes to describe God's works and God's actions, he uses the imperfect tense. And this is hard for us to understand. Well, it's hard for me to understand because I failed freshman English more than I'd like to think of. But the English language doesn't have tense in the verbs in the way that these people had. They didn't have the imperfect tense. The imperfect tense means it's an ongoing action. He says God's actions were continuous. They were going on and on. His and Apollos' actions, they were, and then when they left, they weren't. This lines up with what Jesus said. In Mark 4, verses 26 to 29, let's go to it. We haven't been to Mark in quite a while. Hold on to Corinthians, though. Matthew, Mark, Luke. Mark 4, verses 26 to 29. Jesus also said, the kingdom of God is like a farmer who scatters seed on the ground. Night and day, while he's asleep or awake, the seed sprouts and grows, but he does not understand how it happens. The earth produces the crops on its own. First the leaf blade pushes through, then the heads of wheat are formed, and finally the grain ripens, and as soon as the grain is ready, the farmer comes and harvests it with a sickle, for the harvest time has come. Jesus is describing how plants grow, and the farmer has nothing to do with it. He just put the seed in the dirt. Then it's up to God. Even if the farmer's sitting there staring at a field that he's planted, doesn't make the plants grow any better or faster. When talking about planting seeds, we have no control except making sure that the environment is right. The house that we have in Millville, the farmer behind it had to plant the seeds twice. Something happened. They weren't growing. And how can we talk about planters or people, farmers, and not talk about the most famous parable of Jesus regarding this subject? And if you say, I've heard the parable of the soil so many times, maybe you should remember it's God's word, not yours. and was given to us for a purpose. So if your Father's word bores you, check your heart. What sin have you allowed to take residence to stifle your hunger for his word? When Jesus taught, he taught people in an agrarian society, people who understood that vegetables didn't come from the grocery store. Most of them had their own gardens. Let's flip over to Matthew 13. Matthew 13. And we'll look at verses 3 to 9. He told many parables in the form of, he told many stories in the form of parables, such as this one. Listen, a farmer went out to plant some seeds. He scattered them across the field. Some seeds fell on the footpath, and the birds came and ate them. Other seeds fell on shallow soil with underlying rock. The seed sprouted quickly because the soil was shallow. But the plant soon wilted under the hot sun, and since they didn't have deep roots, they died. Other seeds fell among the thorns that grew up and choked out the tender plants. Still other seeds fell on the fertile soil, and they produced a crop of 30, 60, or even 100 times as much as it had been planted. Anyone with ears to hear, let him listen and understand. So Jesus at this point turns a bolt into a pulpit. Anyone who's studied God's Word or has been a Christian for any length has probably heard this parable many times. This is one of the rare parables, though, that Jesus explained the meaning of. So if you hear someone say, oh, I'm going to tell you another meaning of the parable of the soil, run away. Because Jesus told us what the meaning is. And he does so. If you drop down to verse 18 of Matthew 13, he says, now listen to the explanation of the parable of the farmer planting seeds. The seed that fell on the footpath represents those who hear the message about the kingdom and don't understand it. Then the evil one comes and snatches away the seed that had been planted in their hearts. Here we see the method of how God's kingdom is grown. It's sowed or planted by the farmers, a.k.a. the workers of the field, a.k.a. the errand boys of God. They don't focus on sowing the seed in one particular location. They broadcast it wherever they are, in whatever part of the field that God puts them in. And remember, Paul would say that you are God's field. So wherever they are, that's where they're supposed to be. There's a danger in what many attempt to do, witnessing one opportunity at a time. I'm going to work with this one person until they're saved. I'm going to argue with them. I'm going to discuss it with them. Meanwhile, the whole world walks by. We're not supposed to focus on one person to witness to. Now, mentoring, that's a different thing. We can mentor one person at a time, but we need to be sowing the gospel everywhere we go to everyone we meet. In fact, in Mark, it says we proclaim the gospel to all of creation. So even if we don't know anyone's around, it should be evident that we're witnessing. We're spreading the seeds of the gospel. Tossing the seed outward from themselves, the farmer would just frankly, they don't care where the seed lands. The idea is to get as much seed out as possible. It's a numbers game. The idea was just to get it out as quickly as possible. The more seed that's spread, the greater chances that they'll have more of a harvest. Now, three things are the same in this parable. The purpose of the farmer who sows the seed is the same. It doesn't matter what part of the field they're in. If you're sowing seed, you sow the seed. Get the seed in the soil in order to produce fruit. Yes, the farmer may physically be different, but long story short, their job is the same. Sow it. Sowing the seed of the gospel is not for a select few. Some people say, well, no, I was brought up in a church like that. Only you bring your friends to church and they'll get saved by the pastor or by some of the... No, everyone here who's a born-again believer is equipped to share the gospel. Well, I don't have enough knowledge. No. If you are a born-again believer, that means that you heard the gospel, you accepted it, and it became a part of you, unless you believed in vain. And so you have a commission from Jesus. The last thing he said to his people in Matthew 28, verses 18 to 20. Jesus came and told his disciples, I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you, and be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. This is a command for all of us to follow. And if you're unwilling, it's a lie to say you can't. It's you won't. The truth is, perhaps you're a shallow-hearted believer who has a limited amount of your life that you're willing to give over to the Word. And we'll get more than that. The seed is all the same. It's always the same. It's the message of the kingdom. It's the gospel. There are not special seeds for special times. Ooh, I'm going to give our Christmas Eve gospel. Oh, this is our Good Friday gospel. This is our rainy day gospel. This is our Monday gospel. They always get me down. The seed is the message about the kingdom. It's not created by man. The bestest Christian cannot share the gospel better than anyone who's been affected by the gospel. You're not only the children of God, you've experienced his love. You've experienced the gospel. The work of Christians is to not make up a new message or modify the seed. It is to sow the same seed and to given to us by God. The gospel is the gospel. Now, also the soil is basically the same. And yes, I know some of the soil has been pressed down. It's become hard. Some of it is a thin soil over a very hard rock surface. Others in weedy soil or nice soil. In fact, when you look at it when he's planting the seed, pretty much all the soil looks the same. But here's the thing. The soil of our hearts all start out the same. The difference in the hearts and the soil they represent is not the composition of the soil. It's the condition of the soil. Every heart, every soil, given the right conditions, is capable of supporting growth. We are all born with hearts sinful and hostile to God. Romans 8:7, for the sinful nature is always hostile to God. It never did obey God's laws, and it never will. Every heart, though, like every soil, is capable of being redeemed. There is no heart that is not capable of being saved. Let's look at the four conditions that are different of the soil and the heart conditions that they represent. Excuse me. It says that some seed fell on a hard path, and the farmer or other people that walked on it. Now, we have to remember that in this day and age, they didn't have roadways like we know them today. Like, it seems like, roads that go every single different place. They didn't have that. There are pathways that people would walk on. And they didn't really have boundaries for things. If you wanted to walk across that field, you could and start a new path. The farmer wouldn't say anything. He'd probably use that path. But over time, from people walking on it, from animals walking on it, the path would get packed down. The seed couldn't penetrate because the soil was pressed down and compacted. And Jesus says that the birds would come along and eat those up. And what the birds didn't eat, in Luke's account, in Luke 8:5, it says that the seeds were crushed under people's feet. The soil, Jesus says, represented people's hearts who don't understand the gospel, whose hearts have become hard to the point where they're incapable of accepting the gospel. They don't understand and they don't want to understand. It's been said that many Bible-believing churches can produce hard-hearted people. People who hear what God wants of them, feel convicted, but instead of submitting to his will in humble obedience, dig their heels in and refuse. And so with every message, their hearts get harder and harder. The same sun that softens the wax hardens the clay. That's God's choice, God's decision to call them. So that when the gospel is preached, it cannot get into a person's heart. And if the gospel can't get into your heart, you cannot be saved. There are a lot of people who have the gospel in their heads, but salvation is not intellectual, as we saw. It's a heart action. He says, other seed fell on soil that looked really good. Verse 20, the seed on the rocky soil represents those who hear the message and immediately receive it with joy. But since they don't have deep roots, they don't last long. They fell away as soon as they have problems and are persecuted for believing God's word. While there's a thin layer of soil and it looks good and it's probably very fertile, it only goes down so far. And then essentially there's a hard rock beneath that it can't penetrate. And these people will receive it and they look like, wow, they're Christians. Look how joyful they are. Look how happy they are. Look how they're just so excited. But they proceed to set up boundaries on how far they will allow the gospel into their lives. I will commit to Sunday morning meetings and that's it. You want me to come out for Wednesdays for a prayer meeting? Oh, deal breaker. I can't do that. I have my life to live. Become a member? This is really good for the 3 people in membership class. I can't commit to being a member. I would be eligible to do more things that people would have to ask of me. I would have to become responsible for other things. Frankly, I have too much in my life to do. I'm not saying that the people in the class are saying that, but that's how I thought about membership when I first joined the church down in Rhinebeck. But will have so many excuses as to why they can't put forth effort. These boundaries that sometimes people put in their lives according to the gospel, they make up excuses why they can't. I can't do more studies. I can't read the Bible more than 10 minutes a day. And what happens is, because the gospel doesn't take root deeply in their lives, doesn't transform them the way it should. When trials come, when tribulations come, when the doctor says cancer, they wither up and they die. Because in the desert of a person's trials, their roots can't access the refreshing spring of water. In Jeremiah 17:7 and 8, it says this, "But blessed are those who trust in the Lord and have made the Lord their hope and confidence. They are like trees planted along a riverbed with roots that reach deep into the water. Such trees are not bothered by the heat or worried by long months of drought. Their leaves stay green, and they never stop producing fruit." That's why a shallow soil believer can't be saved. You can't put limits on God and say, well, I'll give you this much of my life. God wants it all, or he doesn't want anything. Then there's the seed that landed among the thorns in verses 22 and 24 of Matthew 13. The seed that fell among the thorns represents those who hear God's word, but all too quickly the message is crowded out by the worries of this life and the lure of wealth, so no fruit is produced. Here again, soil is good. But they've allowed them, they didn't limit the message, they let the message in, but they've let other stuff in as well. The message of the gospel becomes crowded out by the worries of this life, the lure of wealth. What else can we put here? The fear of the future, the fear of government, the uncertainty of today. Will a recession wipe out what little we have? Will the market collapse? Will he run for office again? I'm telling you, these things crowd out a person's faith. Great illustration. I've heard people talk politics. They'll do a Bible study, and then one of them will start talking about politics. And you never should finish up a Bible study with politics. All about the things that are wrong in the world and what Christians need to be doing in the political process. These worldly conversations undermine the idea of faith and being errand boys to God and errand girls to God. It becomes about the wrongs of those who are in control. And because the people telling it are having their worldly knowledge, it brings attention to themselves. These conversations about politics and the world and everything that may or may not happen are weeds that choke out the word. After all, if you really believe in the message of the kingdom, if you really believe that God is in control, if you really believe that God placed those people in power over us, and he did, just as the Bible says in Romans 13, verses 1 to 2, everyone must submit to governing authorities, for all authority comes from God, and those in positions of authority have been placed there by God. So anyone who rebels against authority is rebelling against God who instituted it, and they will be punished. Do you believe that today? So then, why on earth do you complain about the person who's in power, or who may be in power, or who was in power? God put him there. That means something, doesn't it? So, I'm tired of seeing people who say they're Christians write mocking posts on their Facebook page about the people in power. It's wrong. You're just demonstrating your worldly behavior. Because God put that person there. And if you don't believe that, why would anyone believe anything else you had to say? Because you're going to act just like with the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that other people are already experiencing without the Lord. Then there's the last kind of soil, the best kind. Verse 23, the seed that fell on good soil represents those who are truly hear and understand God's word and produce a harvest of 30, 60, and even 100 times as much as has been planted. The fourth kind is a good soil. No limits. It's soft. It accepts the seed as a whole. It doesn't put limits down. It produces a bountiful harvest. Christians are supposed to be fruitful. We're supposed to replicate more believers. We're supposed to be sowers. And that's what our job is. But not only are we supposed to be farmers, but we're also to be waterers. Remember, Paul started the church in Corinth, planted the seeds of the gospel. God brought the growth as only God can. But Paul couldn't see those hearts. He couldn't see what was under the soil. He didn't know whose soil was hard and whose soil was had boundaries on it or rocks underneath it. He just sowed the seed. And while some may have looked like good soil, they may have been thin soil. But all Paul did, because that's all an errand boy does, is sow the seed. And then Apollos came after him, later down on the timeline. And while he may have planted the word in others around him too, he also watered. He fed believers who had received the word when Paul was there, people who weren't ready for the meat at that time, because a baby's not ready for meat when it first is born. Christians, when they're first born, are not meat eaters. Not even bacon. But they're people, over time, that's what they did. They wanted more. They needed more. They weren't satisfied with milk. Matthew 5:6, Jesus said, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness." Remember, Jesus is the only source of righteousness. He says, "For they shall be satisfied." Now, Apollos didn't say, well, guys, I'd love to help you, but I didn't plant the seed of the gospel in you. You better call Paul and have him come. And that's why Paul says, we are one. Planters or waterers. It doesn't matter how a person's been saved or who saved them. Because, frankly, God saves everyone. Our job, errand boy, errand girl, share the gospel. Water the seed. So Paul concludes by saying 1 Corinthians 3:7, so neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. Just errand boys, errand girls, that's all we are. If you want to think of yourself as something more, I'm sorry. You're not. I'm not. We have to remember it's only about God. And Paul concludes in verse 8 and 9. He says, he who plants and he who waters are one. They do the same job. or the same level of job, and each will receive his wages according to his labor. While the tasks may be different, we are one in God. And so all the glory goes to him. You never give glory to an errand boy or a gopher. John MacArthur writes, recognition of our oneness in the Lord is a sure and only remedy for divisiveness. It leaves no place for the flesh and its jealousy, strife, and division. When we recognize that all we are to each other are errand boys or errand girls, we don't have to be, recognized. We don't have to be. It doesn't stop there, but it says God rewards his workers. Please understand, God's reward is not based on our success or our results that we get. He rewards based on our labor. We will be rewarded for the amount of work we do. And frankly, our rewards will all be the same. It doesn't matter. And we see this in the Bible. You see Jeremiah, right? Jeremiah, who was beaten, who was what God warned Jeremiah in Jeremiah 13:10, these wicked people refuse to listen to me. They stubbornly follow their own desires and worship other gods. Therefore, they will become like this loincloth, good for nothing. He was beaten multiple times for speaking God's words to the people. He was sentenced to death. He was thrown into a cistern to die. Yet in spite of it all, he remained obedient, and he suffered. But Jeremiah saw very little results. He suffered all these things, and very little results. But then there was Jonah, who literally had to be dragged by God inside the belly of a fish to obey him, and we see a great city of Nineveh converted to the Lord. A Christian's effectiveness, your ability to share the gospel, is not in how eloquent you are. It's purely by the grace of God. Again, it's not about us, but our willingness to submit to the will of God and sow the seed. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians 15:10, but whatever I am now, it is all because of God poured out his special favor on me, and not without results. For I have worked harder than any of the other apostles, yet it was not I, but God who was working through me by grace. It's okay to appreciate God's workers. It's good to say to them, good job, offer them encouragement, come alongside a brother or sister who is struggling. But God's workers should not be set apart. They should not be considered better or more holy than others. They are not to be glorified or made the center of attention. As I said, it's okay to encourage them. It's okay to say, good message, Pastor. Or, wow, I learned something in class. Teacher, you must have studied really hard to prepare to speak or teach us today. Now, one last thing. An interesting change of word that Paul uses in 1 Corinthians 3. In verse 9, he says, for we are God's fellow workers, you are God's field, and God's building. In verse 9, where he says, we are God's fellow workers, it's not the same Greek word translated servants in verse 5. No, it's a Greek word, sunergos, literally under-rower. That was the lowest slave in a boat. Remember, the Roman boats were propelled some by air, but they were mainly powered by people rowing, slaves. And they would have multiple levels of rowers. And these rowers were not volunteers. They were slaves. They were put in a position, they were chained to it, and they would die in that position. Which we have to remember. They didn't take bathroom breaks while they sat there. They sat there in their own filth. Now think about it. You're 2 stories below the other slaves above you. Think about what he's saying about being an under-rower and what that means. It's filthy, disgusting, and you couldn't get out of it except to die. And he says, we are those under-rowers. That's who we are. We're all the same, and we're all the under-rowers. Paul and Apollos were just like everyone else, as long as they were believers. They recognized each other as just servants, errand boys of God, under-rowers of the Lord. If today you need that spotlight on you, you need to be up front. You need to have that title. You have to ask, why are you acting merely as men, merely as women of the world? And Paul concludes by saying the Corinthian church was God's field. Paul planted and Apollos watered, but they didn't even own the field. They held no claim over the Corinthian church. The people of the field of that church, of this church, it's not Bill's, it's not Tim's. It's God's field. We are not the owners of anything here. It's all God's. God puts you in the field that He wants you in, and your job is not to evaluate the field, decide if it's worthy of your time or worthy of your effort or not. Your job is not to tell others to do the work of the field while you sit around and try and order them to do. Your job is to sow the seed of God's Word faithfully. Wherever God puts you, you plant the seed regardless of what the soil looks like, because you can't really tell. I can't see a person's heart, and neither can you. And even if you could, it's God who brings the growth. But you also have to be a waterer. Tend the plants already growing in the field. Be an encouragement to them. Don't just say, well, that's stupid, or that's an idiot thing to do. Why would you think that? You know what? That tears down. It doesn't build up. While the jobs are different, planting and watering, it's the fact that we have the privilege to be called by God to do it. We get to be God's errand boys and the errand girls. And if that's not enough for you, are you not merely being human? We need to encourage, not people who just volunteer to do nothing, but criticize everything other people are doing. That's not the way of Christ. To do what the Corinthian church Christians had done and try and lift one believer up over another is carnal and it's divisive. Christians are supposed to be doing this in whatever field God puts you in, the more often than not. And before you say, but I'm not a pastor, so it doesn't apply to me, or I'm not a teacher, I'm just someone on the sidelines. Remember the writer of Hebrews had said he expected them at this point to be mature enough to be teachers at this point. If you are not spiritually growing today, what soil is in your heart? Paul continues at the end to claim that the Corinthians were not only God's field, but His building. And that's what we'll cover next week. Please understand, at some point, every pastor will leave the church, either because they're called elsewhere or they die. But remember, this isn't just about pastors. It's about every ministry head. Everyone who helps in a ministry is the same. Unless Jesus returns in the meantime, every church is going to face leadership decisions, whether it's a pastorate, it's a ministry, head teachers. We don't throw bodies into positions because there's a body. Everything should be addressed in prayer, in studying God's Word. All too often people just want to shove bodies into things. I'm sorry, that's not the way it should be. We need to go to God because He's the one that provides the growth. Leaders need to be planters who can sow the seed. You need to be planters who can sow the seed. Not with words alone, but with your heart. Otherwise, you're just a hypocrite. We need to be waterers, people coming alongside and encouraging each other. When the path gets hard, people who have studied God's Word and so understand it, not allowing errant teaching into the body. They need to understand their place in God's economy. It doesn't matter if you lead or you must serve. Not just serve. Some people look at it as, well, I'll serve until I get to the position I'm in. So I've been serving all this time, so now I'm this position, so I stop serving. No, that's not what Jesus demonstrated. You serve to the end. You're an under-rower. Remember what that means. And if that's too disgusting for you or too dirty of a job for you, You don't understand what it is to wash people's feet in a day of horses and camels. We're supposed to be hard workers. It's not supposed to be easy. We have to remember this. So today, keep sowing, even if you don't see results. It's not about you or your abilities. Your job, sow the seed, spread the water. It's not complicated. It's God's job that's the hard one. He causes the growth. Let us pray. Our Lord and our God, we thank you, Lord, for all that you do in our lives. Father, give us that drive to be more a sower of joy, a joyful sower in your fields, Lord, wherever and whenever we're there. Lord, we praise you for giving us these jobs. And yeah, they may be errand boys or under rowers, but Lord, we're an under rower of you. Let us do all that you give us to do with joy, now and forever. In your name, amen.